Welcome, friends. Welcome to A Call for Love. Today we're learning about how making assumptions creates suffering in your life. Have you ever done that? You didn't hear from somebody and you start creating all these mental stories in your mind? Well, that's what we're talking about today, because in the book, The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz, he talks about first being impeccable with your word. I talk about that in episode 94. Then he talks about don't take anything personally, which is episode 95. And today it's about not making assumptions. So I feel that when we're impeccable with our word and when we don't take things seriously, that's about 75% of all the kind of pain and anguish we go through. But if we make assumptions, I feel like the gain we created on following those two agreements, we backtrack. Because once we make an assumption, we start taking things personally, and then we may become less impeccable with our word. And that's what I'd like to talk to you here about today. Now, I'd like to tell you a story. When we start taking things personally, I feel we go backwards. We go down a rabbit hole. And I have come to realize with my clients and even in my own life that we mostly make assumptions when we're feeling vulnerable. And I want to give you a very clear example. I received my yoga teaching certificate, I guess, about 11 years ago now, almost 12. And I was quite insecure as a new yoga teacher. And I was always going to the studio with a friend of mine. And we didn't go together, but I always would see him in class. And then about 24 hours before, I received a message. Can you please sub my class? Because she knew I always went to her class. So she knew I knew how she liked to orchestrate it. And I said, absolutely, I would love to go to your class. And what happened was when I arrived, this friend of mine, he wasn't there. And all through class, I'm like, he didn't show up because he thought I was going to teach it. I'm not good enough for him. Why wouldn't he go to the class because I'm teaching it? He goes all the time when she's teaching it. And all these stories went on in my head. I was making all these assumptions that I was really believing because I was feeling vulnerable. I was in a vulnerable place, an insecure place about this new path I was going on and my abilities. Well, I got home and I was stewing on it. And I thought, I'm going to message him. And I thought, no, I'm not going to message him. That's just childish. And I went back and forth in my mind. And the problem is that eventually I did sleep on it. And in the morning, I said, okay, I'm not going to make an assumption. Let me just ask. So I tippy-toed like on ice. Oh, I didn't see you last night. I missed you. And he says, yeah, I couldn't go. Oh, and then, well, that doesn't give me enough information. So my mind went further and further into this rabbit hole. And I said, oh, yes, things come up. He says, yeah. And then he listed all these things. He didn't even know that I was teaching the class. His car broke down. The kids, needed help with their homework, and the story went on. And I was like, oh my goodness. I had ruminating mind the night before. My sleep wasn't as peaceful as it normally is because I was making all these assumptions because of the vulnerability that I was holding within. That was my first lesson in not making assumptions. Don't make assumptions. When you make assumptions, you do set yourself up for problems, for suffering. But the thing is we we often are making assumptions all the time. I feel like when we were children, we always asked, why this, why that, why mommy, why daddy, why teacher, why this? And it was probably really annoying to those adults who were exhausted from working all day or the endless questions. And I almost feel that we were taught that asking questions is prying and it's invading and it's exhausting and all those things. And I believe we almost lost that really beautiful trait of curiosity. And this agreement actually invites it back in. When we make assumptions, we don't have the clear picture. But when we ask questions, it helps create a clearer picture, maybe the more truthful picture. The problem is when we ask questions, we have to be willing to hear the answers. If you're going to ask someone a question, you have to be willing to hear what they have to say. And that leaves us very, very vulnerable. As human beings living and navigating through this human experience, we really always strive for safety, try to feel safe in our body, in our life, in our mind. And when we ask questions, we don't know the answer that we're going to get. And that can create a lot of fear. And when we ask those questions, then it becomes our responsibility to allow the other person to share their truth. If we're not willing to hear their truth, that may stop us from asking those questions. But then the calling here, a call for love, is to ask those questions and honor the other person in order for us to live the mirror image. We don't want people making assumptions about us. And so we have to deliver the same respect and honor the same boundaries to other people. And that's what I really want to point here to, is when we find our voice, when we find our strength to create those questions, to ask people for clarification, then what happens is miracles happen. We find out the truth, and from the truth, it empowers us to have greater communication skills and have this deeper knowing of what other people need and what we need. And from there, it becomes like a beautiful unfolding, a beautiful blossoming. The problem when we do make assumptions is that we try to substantiate them. When I was thinking about my friend who didn't show up for the yoga class, I was thinking, oh, he doesn't think I'm a good enough teacher. He thinks, I'm new. I can't offer the same quality of class. I was going through all these. I was a new teacher. So yes, that could have been some of the reality of the circumstances. But what happened was I came home and I was telling my husband, and that's when gossiping came in. I started gossiping about, well, he didn't want to come to my class because I'm not good, and I was not speaking very kindly. And that is a form of, Don Miguel Ruiz calls that kind of black magic. That's the darkness. That's the shadow within us. And the gossiping arrives because really we are defending our point of view and we are trying to convince others that we're right. We're trying to convince others that the illusion that we've created in our mind without clarity, we are substantiating it. We were making it more legitimate in our mind. And of course, as I've said in the other agreements, gossiping is very, very, it's a shadow self. There's no benefits whatsoever in gossiping. And we want to release He calls it emotional poison. We can't expect other people, do you find this, to read our minds. I know when I was younger and I was in relationships, I expected people to understand my needs. And looking back, I'm not sure I understood all my needs as well. However, that being said, I expected other people, especially my partners, to realize my needs. And that's very, very unfair, because when we don't express our needs and then we get upset with people for not fulfilling our needs, we're making assumptions and they're making assumptions. We're assuming they know what we need, when in reality they don't. I'll give you an example. I have a friend and she's married to a man, and she needed him. She needed him and he wasn't there for her. And I said, well, did you ask him? Did you ask him? She says, no, he should know. He should know that I need him at this point in my life. And I'm like, well, maybe he should know, but that's an assumption that you're making. Can you ask him? And this is when nonviolent communication comes in very handy, how we ask and how we share our needs to others. And so she said, well, so she gave it a shot. And there was a beautiful unfolding, because then they had a chance to communicate. When we communicate, I've said this in other episodes, we want to use the I message. We never want to start with you, because that's blame and shame. We want to say, I feel this, when this happens. I find that sometimes we need to make ourselves very clear. I know that, if let's say in my relationship with my husband, we are purchasing things for our home or for our family, and it'll be our anniversary, and I will say, let's agree we're not going to buy each other a gift, but I would really love us to exchange heartfelt cards. And then we come to this agreement, and then there's no problem. I didn't assume that when I said no gifts, that he would just automatically give me a card. Now, would he? He probably would. But the point is that I didn't want to assume that he's going to know what I needed. And so I stated it in a very clear way, and it was very, very helpful. It really diffused a potential heartbreak. I mean, am I going to be completely heartbroken? No, but maybe a disappointment. And that's what happens when we don't make assumptions. We free ourselves and we free others. That's the beautiful part. There's freedom in it. When we ask those questions and use nonviolent communication, expressing ourselves, we can turn this awareness into action. We can allow this beautiful unfolding of being impeccable with our word, of not taking things personally, and not making assumptions. When we don't make assumptions, we're not going to take things personally. I have this discussion in my group, Soul Skool, where we dive into the intricacies of living and navigating through this human experience and really listening to our soul truth. You are welcome to join Soul Skool. There's free membership. I'll leave the link in the show notes. But in Soul Skool, we talk about these things. We talk about it in a space that are for soul seekers. And if you are a soul seeker, then you want to create these truths for yourself. And as Don Miguel Ruiz says, that these agreements we make, they can set us up for success or for failure. When we renegotiate the parts of ourselves that we're always defending and come back into the truth of who we are and really come from a place of compassion. So if you're very, very, very hard on yourself and you're always making assumptions, it's probably very possible that other people are making assumptions of you. So we have to be the change. We have to set that communication standard in our lives first. And I believe we can do that. And that's where meditation comes in, that conscious awareness of being really clear, being the observer of our thoughts. Because when we observe our thoughts and we believe our thoughts, that could send us into a tailspin of believing what is not true, what are illusions. But when we approach life with curiosity, when we approach it less serious, right? When we approach it, I wonder, I always say this, isn't it interesting? Isn't it interesting that my mind, when goes into this loop, when somebody doesn't respond to me, are they not validating me? Do they not like me? And I say this all the time to my clients. No, we're making assumptions and then we're supporting it in our ruminating thoughts, which is very, very similar to gossiping. And so, my dear friends here, take a look, go back to the previous episodes. I have shadow work and soul work and light work in Soul Skool on this book. It's a gem. It's something that we come back to every once in a while, right? To really feel into it and notice how we are in this moment, how we are navigating in this stage of our life, in this season of our life. So I thank you for joining. Please share this with a friend. I value your time, and I really appreciate you listening, because when we do this work together, we raise not only ourselves, we raise those around us, and then we raise the collective consciousness. And that is my greatest dream for living in this moment. All right. So, dear friends, thank you so much. From my heart to yours, namaste.